So at mood disorders, we have been treating for centuries now, thinking that mood disorders is an imbalance of neurotransmitter. And it's not wrong, it is correct. But when we treat it just by putting a blocking, basically a band-aid on top of your neurons and say, let's block serotonin, let's block recapture of serotonin, which are hormones of your brain, it works for a little while, but it doesn't work on the long run and cannot prevent your brain or give the chance for your brain to rewire and restore. When you work on understanding how the mitochondria functioning is happening in your brain and you treat that, that's the game changer.
So welcome to At the Helm, the podcast series where we dive into the science and the stories behind using a food-first approach to transforming health. I'm your host. I'm Dr. Charles Helm. I'm a family physician. I'm also a paleontologist, and I'm just fascinated by the intersection of our ancestral diets and our modern health challenges. I'm really honored to be broadcasting today from the traditional territories of the Treaty 8 First Nations, northeastern British Columbia, in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in my home community of Tumbler Ridge. Now, today we are venturing into the fascinating world of mitochondria, those tiny engines inside our cells that are so critical to our health. Joining us is Dr. Andreazza, who's truly a trailblazer in understanding how mitochondria influence brain health, mood disorders, metabolism, and a lot more. She is a professor in pharmacology, toxicology, and psychiatry at the University of Toronto, and she runs a lab that focuses on understanding the role of mitochondrial function. She's got over 125 research publications to her credit. She's the recipient of numerous awards. She's leading the charge in Canada in exploring how mitochondrial dysfunction plays a role in just about everything, but in particular severe psychiatric disorders, neurodegenerative disorders, metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes, a lot of things. Dr. Andreazza, Anna, welcome to At the Helm. It's just a delight to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure, Dr. Helm, to speak with you today, and hopefully we have an energetic conversation.
Let's hope so, yeah. So if I can just start with saying, a long time ago when I was a medical student, I was taught that mitochondria were, quote, the powerhouses of the cell, unquote. They were the batteries, if you will. And honestly, we just left it at that. That's what I was taught, and that was it. Nowadays, we really know that it's far more complex than that. So if I can just start with really the basics, but if you're trying to explain this, let's just say to a relative or a friend who doesn't know that much about what you do, what would you tell them? What are mitochondria and why are they so critical to our health?
Well, I think the powerhouse of the cells is still a very, very right term to actually say. These tiny little structures that are inside of our cells called mitochondria I like to call them a hub. But if I try to think in analogy, I would think as a budget. Imagine if it's your bank account of your cells. The mitochondria being in your bank account will produce the coin of your cells that is called the adenosine triphosphate, the energy supplies of your cells. And the more you have, the more budget you have, the more enzyme functions, the more your cells can actually process and do the job they're supposed to do. So when your bank account is healthy, you have an income, is a good income, you can actually pay your mortgage or rent, you can also pay nice restaurant foods, maybe you can actually treat yourself here and there with a nice pair of new clothing, go out with your friends. But if your budget is not that healthy, with the economy going rise, the price of food in Canada going crazy, and your budget is limiting, first thing you're gonna do as anyone would do is pay your mortgage or rent and pay your food. These are your necessities. These are your main things you have to do. And then if there is something left, you would do. But you're going to trim out all the fats. You're not going to buy the coffees that you often used to buy outside. You're not going to go out for restaurants. You would cook your own meals. Your cells, mitochondria is exactly like that. Is your budget. The more healthy your mitochondria is, the more ATP or the energy coins it has accumulated. So your mitochondria has one single role, is to keep you alive. It's really important to think that no mitochondria, no life. That's simple. We start having life because we incorporate mitochondria inside the cells. So first role, mitochondria are going to start to think, I have to keep you alive. What's it going to be? Beating your heart, keeping your muscles at a point that you can move, able to see, able to breathe, and able to think, but a minimal thinking. When the mitochondria has not enough, this is all the minimal functions will be kept alive. But now mitochondria is healthy. Now the mitochondria can actually go and say, okay, heart, you are actually need a little bit more recover on certain parts. You have some arteriosclerosis, so I'm going to actually put some more energy in that area. I'm going to remove that plaques that are out there. Well, brain, you are foggy today. I'm going to give you more energy. I'm going to actually put your capacity at maximum. Now my heart is like, oh, I'm happy. Now I have a good metabolism. My brain is like, oh, I'm sharp. I can work. So budgeting your mitochondria, your coins, if it's healthy, your body becomes healthy. If it is mitochondria start impaired, start decreasing the capacity of work well, it will keep you to the mean. That's where diseases start happening. If your mitochondria becomes so unhealthy for such a long process of time, your organ, let's think about the heart, will start injuring. The capacity of blood pumping will decrease, then it will accumulate more plaques. Your brain, if we think about diseases, you don't have enough energy, enough like mitochondria to go around. Your cognition will decrease, associations with cognition dysfunction, Alzheimer's, depression. But now you have accumulation of mitochondria in some parts, producing too much dispersal of energy, accumulation that can lead to mania, to other diseases. So this is just to put it as in a thinking. When you think about mitochondria, think as a hub that try to connect with everything in your body and try to tell you, I am alive, I'm healthy, I'm good, I'm going to make the body works in capacity. Not so healthy, I'm going to keep you alive. So that is kind of how I kind of think if I try to explain mitochondria and health.
That's a lovely analogy. I haven't heard that before, but so the budget and the coins and yeah, what's the ultimate purpose? To keep us alive. So when I sort of read up about mitochondria now, I know they're involved in just about everything, hormonal, immune response, calcium, stress, epigenetics, everything.
Yeah,
and that's just so different from when I was a medical student. So how has our understanding evolved in recent years? What are the new things that we've learned about mitochondria that maybe we didn't know 10 years ago?
Yeah, a lot of things. So let's try to keep very small examples and then we can build on as we go for the podcast. But in the beginning, as we said, we learned it just is a powerhouse. The only one single function of mitochondria is taking the oxygen, taking glucose, put it inside of your mitochondria, put the enzymes to work inside and form your energy coin, the ATP. Now we know that is way more complex than that. So, for example, mitochondria has this capacity of looking into like a battery, right? Then in the end, the membrane potential is different between outside and inside. That's what is called the battery. But that battery is extremely important because now it senses the environmental changes in your outside of the mitochondria, and let's say it has too much calcium on outside. Mitochondria now has pores on the out membrane that can open and buffer calcium. Extremely important in the heart, in circulation, in immune cells. Mitochondria produces reactive oxygen species. And when the reactive oxygen species are forming, it's so essential for understanding bacteria, virus controlling. that as one of your first line of defenses of killing the bacteria that are around. Reactive oxygen species in other cells, not the white blood cells, but in your brain, actually act as neurotransmissions. It's telling one neuron to the other, astrocyte to the neuron, how well sensing its cells are done. So yeah, we have basically from 10 years ago or from 50 years ago, mitochondria is only 50 years we know actually, it's biology, right? So we learned that that is not only about ATP production, your energy coin is actually signaling modulation. That's why we often say mitochondria is involved in everything. It's because mitochondria is a signal hub. It allows your cells to signal its processes.
Right. So you've used words like neurodegenerative, mental health, metabolic already.
Yeah.
Your research has linked those issues with mitochondrial dysfunction, and I think you've used the word game changer for the possible effects this could have on the practice of medicine. So can you just give me an insight why you use the word game changer and what the potential is here?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think it's game changer because now we're going back to look at inside the cell at the root cause of what is going on and preventing failure. Once you restore cellular energy, it's like rewiring your cells to be able to work at the best capacity, preventing organ failure. So let's put that on my own research, which I study mostly mood disorders. So at mood disorders, we have been treating for centuries now, thinking that mood disorders is an imbalance of neurotransmitter. And it's not wrong, it is correct. But when we treat it just by putting a blocking, basically a band-aid on top of your neurons and say, let's block serotonin, let's block recapture of serotonin, which are hormones of your brain, it it works for a little while, but it doesn't work on the long run and cannot prevent your brain or give the chance for your brain to rewire and restore. When you work on understanding how the mitochondria functioning is happening in your brain and you treat that, that's the game changer. You're giving the time of your brain to rewire. And I'm sure we're going to have opportunity today to talk about how metabolism is important on that and how actually nutritional therapies have been a transformative approach, especially for mood disorders.
Yeah, I'd love to get onto the nutritional therapy in just a second, but can I just ask you, um, the fact that so many doctors, colleagues of ours, are not yet aware of this, it's not maybe in the curriculum for medical students. Has it been overlooked, or is it just that now we need to start getting it in there because now we're beginning to understand, or has it
Yeah.
actually been neglected?
No, it's a fantastic question. And I think it's a bit of both. I think as we innovated in science, we needed to prove the innovation, right? We need to ensure that things are there. So it takes some time to curriculums to catch up with innovation. And yet you are absolutely correct. We did not know enough to be say this should be part of medicine. But now we actually very getting very close to actually have diagnostic tools that can help you. And in fact, when you go to your physicians for your checkup, they're going to click the lipid biomarkers, right? Of the HDL, the LDL, so your good cholesterol, your bad cholesterol. They also can ask you your glucose levels, your insulin levels that are already existing, other biomarkers that are part of the medical system that we did not know for many years ago, but now we know that adding those on your health batteries can elude how your mitochondria is helping. What we still not having to offer for clinicians is a diagnose, a simple blood test that tells is my mitochondria functioning, respiring well. That yet we don't have a clinically validated panel. I think that will be the next generation that we need to bring probably everyone to feel comfortable of ordering those tests.
Right. I'd like to come on to that in a second as well, but first I'd like to tackle the question of nutrition. And I mean, a very simple question. How does what we eat influence our mitochondrial function? Probably a complex answer, but a simple question.
Complex as without like me with a whiteboard and kind of try to show everything. But let's put it in a most simplified ways. Like, remember when we say your brain like sugar, you need energy, eat the sugar. That is actually not as simple for mitochondria. We like to think about mitochondria being a source that needs your energetic foods. So when you eat, your foods are broken down into glucose. But the more time take to break down, the more time you give for the mitochondria to get that glucose to actually enter the mitochondria. Let's forget about some now for the fibers, for the antioxidants, which are very important for maintaining mitochondrial health. Let's just concentrate on glucose. Glucose now will go through steps until it reaches a molecule, which is basically breaking down the glucose to get to a molecule called pyruvate. Pyruvate now is able to enter the mitochondria and activates a circle called Krebs circle. That cycle goes on and produces now molecules that can go inside the electron transport chain, basically taking your glucose, breaking down, and now the cycle that is going through is breaking even more down in simple protons and electrons, passing through this complex electron transport chain to form your final product, the coin, the energy coin, adenosine triphosphate, right? So glucose is intimately related to the amount of energy that your cells will be producing, with one caveat. Where the glucose, when it enters to that pyruvate, the important molecule for learning the name, and going to that cycle, if that cycle is not working in its gone capacity, each of those byproducts that is inside of the cycle now are responsible to start other productions in the body. For example, if your cycle is stuck on a first step called citric acid, the citric acid accumulation will change your lipid profile in your cells. But now let's say continue and accumulate again in another molecule called oxalate. That molecule will change now your glutamine, glutamate, which are hormones important for the brain. So every cycle within, it is very important, it's tightly regulated with lipid controls, with hormone productions, with alterations in your levels of fatty acids in your body. When I said, let's just focus on glucose and not think so much about the other products, is because there is a processes before when you eat food that convert your food, all the products that it has inside of your food, into be broken down to get to glucose. That time that we break down the food to get to glucose is extremely important, because that gives time for the molecule of glucose to be break down to get to pyruvate, to get the cycle going, to get the electron going, to get your coin to energy coin. When we eat too much sugar, the straight sugars, the candies, the sodas, all of that, you gave in that accumulation of glucose in your cell, you activate insulin resistance, which blocks that glucose to be activated, and you now make your mitochondria to produce something called lactate, which instead going through that cycle beautiful, it goes to the other side that we know that is its function, but that accumulation produces only 2 molecules of your budget gonna reduce from 36 to 2. So you don't want that imbalance too long. You can have for a little bit, for too long, your body gonna face. It's very, very similar. If you think about metabolism regulation for mitochondria and metabolism regulation in diabetes, insulin resistance is very similar. So eating the more complex foods, eating more the nutritional foods with high value nutritionals of vitamins and cofactors, that will actually really help to keep your mitochondria alive. And then not surprising, will help to keep you out of diabetes or out of mood disorders.
Right. I remember, Dr. Andreazza, as a medical student being taught the Krebs citric acid cycle. It's a nightmare when I look back on it because I had to learn it by rote, just off by heart. No one explained it to me like you've just done. I wish someone had, because I would have enjoyed it a lot more than I did. But so what you basically, how can you or I or listeners, viewers, if we want to improve our mitochondrial health, and you've mentioned it's a similar advice to what we're getting from other spheres as well. It's all the same, but it's just wonderful to have this insight. We're really going upstream here to the root cause of things.
Yeah.
So the things we should eat and the things we should avoid. Is there anything else to avoid apart from just the simple sugars?
For mitochondria specifically, the biggest thing to avoid is exactly the simple sugars. That is the first thing I would say you should avoid. Um, any foods with a high content of mercury, or the fishes that have accumulation of high mercuries are actually detrimental for your mitochondrial health. But that it is not well proven, so it's hard even me to say avoid that because of this. The only thing we really know that actually is detrimental for mitochondrial function, and I'm not talking about disease formation because that is a many other processes involved. But if we need to isolate the mitochondria as a little shelf, and we're going to say, if I put this on top of the mitochondria, it's not going to go well. That's glucose, the simple sugar. So if talking about mitochondria, I'm not talking about cardiovascular health or diabetes prevention. We really talk simply, brutally, just by mitochondria. If you can avoid one single thing in your life, which is this pure, simple sugars, you're doing yourself a huge favors. We could go to heavy metals and other things that are present, PFAs, and that are known to be detrimental for mitochondria. But there is a lot of science to be done to prove that to be a fact. So I'm going to stick to the one that I know for sure that you shouldn't do it.
Right. Can I ask you about ketones as well? Why ketones work, if they do work? I think they work, but why? Why do they work, and why are they important?
Oh, I was waiting for that question to come. Thank you. So ketones are produced normally in our body. So we have the ability to take fat and produce products called ketones. Ketones are beautiful for mitochondria. They actually are friends of mitochondria. And why they're friends of mitochondria? Remember the cycle that we just talked that I know it sounds boring to learn, but when you learn what the cycle does, it kind of turns a little bit more interesting. So remember that cycle that I said, well, there is that citric acid in the beginning. If we are accumulating that out, lipid is going to get changed, fatty acid is going to get changed. And then you go a little bit more down and accumulate another one that will change your glutamate production in the body. That same one takes the ketones and put a reverse now in the cycle. It uptake the ketones and start the cycle now going to the other side. So it makes your mitochondria to be doubly energetic. Remember the two that goes for the lactate to produce 2 coins, and you go through the cycle. Oxidative, for instance, you produce 36 coins. When you bring the ketone now inside, you're speeding up the cycle to produce more energy. That's why you feel highly energetic after you eat. Then you start getting ketogenic diet to work. Your body is basically now restoring the mitochondrial capacity and improving. It's like, imagine boosting up your mitochondria to give even more energy. So yes, ketogenic diet and ketones, highly efficient to manipulate and improve mitochondrial health. It is one of the therapies that right now has been used for bipolar disorder, depression, and also been testing in ADHD. There is very few trials. in depression and ADHD, but there is 12 trials currently ongoing in bipolar disorder, with some already finished with very positive results. More in abstract data, but just talking over 130 patients around the world that have been taking this diet now for about 3 years. They have maintained their mood stabilizer for a very long time, which is quite amazing, Charles, to think, because these are diseases that are chronic, like diabetes. They are there for you with your entire life. And the side effects that the medication they had to take is devastating. And when the disease is not controlled, it's not only the person that is affected that suffers, it's the entire family, the entire surroundings. So to see nutritional therapeutics that works at the root cause of what is happening, to transform lives of peoples and families, to bring a restorative medicine into the table, I think that's a game changer. That is amazing that we see that. Do we need to prove more? Yes. Do we have more work to do? Absolutely. Do we need to have more doctors like you engaged? Yes, absolutely. Do we need to train the next generation of physicians? Yes, absolutely. A lot of more work to be done, but that is not to be said that we cannot start education for each of us to learn more. Remember the one thing that I said to not eat? Simple carbohydrates, the ones for glucose. Ketogenic diet, you decrease carbohydrate content and you increase fat and protein content. So it's basically you giving a friendly diet to your mitochondria and helping your body to restore.
Right. So I know that if there was, let's just say, a medication that had the same results as one is seeing in, for example, bipolar disorder with the ketogenic diet, everybody in the world would be lining up, wanting to purchase this medication and take it every day. But because it's a dietary thing, some people, they're not that keen. We're living in a crazy world.
But you make a very interesting point, because let's take the example of Ozempic, right? Yeah. Everybody wants to lose weight. So everybody went to the very easy route, but a very dangerous one if you're not using properly and not using when necessary and with a good guidance of a doctor, as you know very well. But we went in this crazy thing, and exactly for what you said is easy. I take a pill. I don't need to change my behavior. If we want to live as a society, as a healthy society, as a human being that will understand that I can live longer on a much better quality of life, we will have to educate to change societal behaviors that are associated with easy and fast. If that's my perspective, why nutritional approaches are so difficult to change, because it's a behavioral change. Here in Toronto, I used to make this joke, because it's like, okay, 6 a.m. Okay, get out of the bed. Let's go. Okay, let's start working. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's just a crazy amount of work that you just keep going crazy. When do you have time to cook your meals, to prep your meals, to go to the shop to buy? So we're gonna have to change our own mentality, that it does not take that much more time than you just prepare your own food. It's how you shop, is how you buy, where is your local store. And also we're gonna have to educate our own workspaces to accommodate time for maybe a meal prep, maybe to actually warm your food that you brought from home, and eat with others, not in front of your computer.
Right. Yeah. I'm reminded from what you're saying about, if I'm thinking back centuries, even millennia ago, that these mystics and these sages, these wise people, would actually fast. And they would say that they had the most profound insights when they were fasting. And I'm wondering if they were inducing ketosis and were helping their mitochondria to work better, and their brains were working better, and that's why they had these profound insights. I don't think we can prove or disprove it, but it's a thought.
Well, but you are absolutely very correct when you say that fasting actually probably improving, because fasting is a way of inducing ketosis in the body. So basically what is happening, you don't have that glucose anymore available to you, so you're going to have to go to use your fats in the body to produce energy. But to do that, you're going to produce ketones. Ketones going to be your main source now of energy. So some of the patients we work with, they have a very difficult time to adapt on the change, but they actually enjoy very much fasting. So we use intermittent fasting plus nutritional guidance to achieve ketosis in the patient. So that is a very big truth in actually abstain from food. And one thing that we don't talk very much is the power of changing inflammation. When you actually have a much healthier diet, your cells become to be able to restore its immune system and change the amount of inflammatory cytokines going around. So pain, chronic diseases, alterations with the fat cells, because when we're losing weight, the fat cells also release toxins in our body. So the fasting actually help with releasing that. So maybe we just had to go back to our ancients and learn from them.
So, right. So can you just tell me, and our listeners and viewers, if I, for example, have my meal, my supper at 6 o'clock, and I finish at 6:30, and I don't have anything to eat or drink after that other than water, and I get up in the morning, and it's 7 o'clock, and I go for my run or my cross-country ski in winter here in Tumbler Ridge, or I go for a swim, and then I come back, and about 9 o'clock, I have my coffee, whatever. Is that good enough, or do I need to be trying even harder? I think that's what our viewers might want to know.
Yeah, it really will depend of your own metabolic time. So that is a way of you correctly doing that to achieve your own time. It's by measuring when you start forming the level of glucose is inverting by the level of ketones. So for example, I know my own time. If I want to achieve a good fasting for me, I have to stop eating around 7 or 8, and I only start eating at 2. That's my own metabolism that I actually have for a number of years, have learned and worked with my physicians. And for anyone that is listening to this, please, you have to work with a healthcare professional to do things properly. There is harm that you can do to yourself if you don't actually work with someone that is knowledgeable in the field, a nutritionist, a physician. So please don't try to do it things on just on your own. So it is very different for everyone. So my husband, for example, he has a very fast metabolism. 6 hours for him is plenty of abstinence of food. So we actually don't coordinate anymore our meal times because it's very different. but anyways, we figured out our own styles. So message for everyone is listening is it really will have to learn with your body. But if you can do one thing today, is just think every time you're buying a food, try to cook your own food, prepare your own food. Every time you buy something that is already made it, processed, you're going to have to look how much sugar, how much of refined carbohydrates, how much of this they put it. So if you can do one thing today and you want to start eating health, think about making your own food and using less sugar. If making a cake, think, can I go through half of cup instead 1 cup? Start thinking about how you can change. That is an idea, something you can do it on your own.
Right. So I guess we're in the field now, we're in the realm of metabolic health. And on previous podcasts, we've spoken a lot about insulin resistance.
Yeah.
And now today we're talking about mitochondrial health. And I think you've alluded to it already, but can you just, for me, explain the relationship or the connection, if there is one, between insulin resistance and therefore type 2 diabetes and prediabetes and metabolic health?
Yes. So yes, the short answer, yes, that is a relationship, and most of it is the receptors of your cells that actually bring insulin, glucose inside of the cells. The glucose receptors that are sitting on the boundaries of our cells. They have to be functioning properly to bring glucose inside of your cells to get to the mitochondria. That's first one that is important, and as you know very well, these are also very related to diabetes, and they have alterations very significant in them. Insulin is the hormone that for its production on the beta cells is necessary to have mitochondria producing ATP, meaning that energy coin. So the very own production of insulin requires your mitochondria to be properly working on your liver to producing that cells. That's number two. The number three is when the mitochondria becomes to sense insulin resistance, it starts not taking the glucose anymore, and it accumulates lactate. Lactate is not a waste product. We know that now by now, but lactate now, that accumulation of the lactate that is produced by the insulin resistance, only going to start producing two. So you're going to decrease your amount of energy balance that you have. So your budget is getting smaller in your cells. So you're getting damage of your organs every time you're doing, and you're getting less energy to your beta cells to produce insulin again. If you have type 2 diabetes, not type 1, that's a different story. But now there are checkpoints. If you think it's like checkpoints in your cells, that your cell is always thinking back and forth. Okay, is my GLUT1, my glucose receptors working okay? Great, I bring the glucose in. Then, oh, is my mitochondria capable of taking this glucose and provide part of it? Oh, great, okay, move forward. But if in any of these checkpoints, you start seeing problems, that is accumulations and responses that will happen. Insulin resistance automatically make that checkpoint number 1 and number 2 on your mitochondria to become disrupted. So your cycle, the Krebs cycle, now is not working anymore properly as it should. It's pushing glycolysis, meaning lactate accumulation, and this balance will start happening. So how to stop? Reverse your nutrition, reverse what is in your body, start putting in your body nutritional approaches that actually challenge your cells. Think about, like, my checkpoints are blocked here. Let me work with ketones that work down here. Let me work with antioxidants that actually gonna protect my mitochondria, form like a cape around of the mitochondria. So that's how you would like to start changing your mind, start thinking if you had insulin resistance, what you would do it to do. So it's basically the same diet.
Yeah, right. But I guess what really intrigues me here is, and I'm coming at this from my paleontological perspective now, but so we have these high levels at the moment of mitochondrial dysfunction. But did we always have these levels? If I think back centuries ago or millennia ago, did our ancestors also have similar levels and similar incidents? Or is this, like insulin resistance, maybe something that is increasing for whatever reason due to our modern lifestyle or society, whatever it might be? But has this changed over time, or has it always been like this in your view?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And I love the question for two ways. One is ancestry. So we all take mitochondria from our mothers, right? And that's how we actually trace the mitochondria around the world. And we go back to our mitochondria Eve, your first mitochondria that was in Africa. But that mitochondria now start migrating over the world. As we migrate over the world, the mitochondria accumulate changes on the mitochondrial DNA. Those accumulations of chains on the mitochondrial DNA are called haplogroups. That's where they formed lineages of mitochondria that are different from each other. That's why we can, to date, trace where we come from. Each of these haplogroups have different functions in our mitochondria. Some of these mitochondria with haplogroup X, for example, are highly energetic mitochondria. And others that have other types of haplogroup, like Helm, are more heating produced mitochondria. So we already started our life coming with the different lineages of mitochondria that will react to environmental changes and nutritional changes very different from each other. So that's an ancestry point of view that we have to keep in mind, that we need to know where our mitochondria is and to understand how they will respond to the therapies we put in front of them. The other one that you are absolutely correct is, yes, we probably have more nowadays because we have more insulin resistance. We have more sugar consumption. If you look back as a paleontologist, you know that the diets back in the day had very little refined sugars or none, right? We started doing that as we go. Accumulation of, can you imagine a pop, like a little can of pop? You have 20 to 30 grams of sugar. I'm talking about like half of this much of sugar and a single sitting that you take. This will never have happened 100 or 200 years ago. So yes, there is an association, absolutely, from what we see in terms of dysfunction of mitochondria with our lifestyles that we have evolved over the years. But we cannot forget that we all have mitochondria, but we all have different mitochondria that are similar in some ways and different in other ways. That is so important to keep a message that, yes, progressed, but we need to understand your own mitochondria to know how to treat.
Right. No, that's great. And just to note that I am from Africa, Dr. Andreazza. I'm very proud. Not the mitochondrial Eve came from Africa, yes. But
so again, we need to evaluate your mitochondria to see what kind of haplogroup you have.
That's right. But we've already spoken a bit about mood disorders and bipolar disorder, but getting more to the neurodegenerative aspect of things, can I ask you this? Is it a stretch to regard dementia, or at least some cases of dementia, as maybe it's just the end stage, long-term mitochondrial dysfunction? Is that a reasonable thought?
Yeah. Evolving field, super beautiful evolving field, especially in Alzheimer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this concept. I'm pretty sure you are, with diabetes type 3 that just came out of Alzheimer. So that's the type where I will associate with mitochondria as well, and where I would think mitochondrial therapies, perhaps even mitochondrial transplant, which is a new thing happening now, would potentially help a lot on this type. But there are other types of Alzheimer's that I do not think, or cognition dementia, that potentially mitochondria is the root cause. So understanding where mitochondria is implicated, I think that will help us to treat. Parkinson's is a different thing because Parkinson has mutations in proteins that are directly associated with the capacity of mitochondria to divide and merge, which is called biogenesis of mitochondria. So that, for Parkinson's, a bit different. There are huge novel technologies coming out. One of them is actually taking mitochondria from a healthy part of your body and implanted on damaged parts of your body, which is called mitochondrial transplantation. Is mind-blowing, but it's not there yet for treatment of a clinical approach. This is still in research development. Beautiful evolving area. Neurodegeneration, I think, will be the next targets of development of therapies for mitochondria.
Wow, this is all news to me. Mitochondrial transplantation and so on. It's mind-blowing to me. But can I just ask you, you've kind of spoken about it already, but the idea of biomarkers, that there might be things that we as family physicians or a specialist can measure in the blood or wherever that will maybe improve diagnosis, mood disorders, diabetes, other things like that. And you've mentioned lactate. So I'm wondering, can one measure lactate? But the other things that probably push lactate up as well. So it might not be so specific, but biomarkers, what's either available today or what's coming down the pipeline?
So when we're thinking about mitochondria, I like to pose as a question as scientists, for physicians and scientists. Do you think we'll be able to get to a point where we're going to get super highly specific single biomarkers for mitochondria? And probably the answer for that is no. So what we have right now accessibles is lactate. We have accessible ways to measure all that, the cycle that called mitochondrial metabolomics. So the cycle you can measure pyruvate, citric acid, everything. So alone, each of them not gonna tell you much, but in a combination of that and your insulin levels, your glucose levels, your lipid levels, that can tell you where those alterations that you see in the lipid changes are driven because your citric acid is changed. So now the combination of both, yes, it can be done today and it can be done in the medical offices right now as a family physicians, but what we need to clarify and to educate our system of healthcare professionals is how to interpret this in combination. And that I don't think we have reached yet a level of be able to create a guideline to physicians on how they can easily interpret their data they have. But the beauty is the capacity is here. Now we can shift the gears to educate because we spent the past 20 years learning how they were connected. Now we know they're connected. Now we shift the gears to educate. And I think in the next 5 years, we'll see a big change on how we treat disease.
Wow, that is really inspiring. I mean, I look back when I was a young doctor, all we had was total cholesterol.
Yeah.
And then it became HDL and LDL and triglycerides and ratios and also, but I mean, what you're talking about here is just really going upstream, taking it back a level and back a level and back a level to get to the root cause of things. And
yeah,
it
absolutely.
it makes me wish I was a medical student all over.
Well, maybe we can educate together. That would be awesome. But I want to give a clear example for the audience why this would matter for a physician, right? So let's say you are going to prescribe metformin or statins for your patients. You would avoid the prescription of metformin if the metabolites that are in the beginning of the cycle are unhealthy. You would probably treat back that metabolism to get back healthy because metformin inhibits complex 1 in the mitochondria. So if it does that and your cycle is unhealthy, it's going to start spewing up a lot of lipids and becomes unhealthy. So that's a clear example where you would avoid metformin in that patient and you first treat the alteration on the mitochondrial cycle, get that healthy back again, then you would give metformin for the patient if that's the only treatment option for this patient.
Yeah, because I mean, right now, I mean, just about everybody gets given metformin without thinking about it. Yeah, a new type 2 person with type 2 diabetes, let's start off with metformin. It's just almost automatic for my colleagues.
It's like a standard of on the field right now. But if you look how people react to that treatment is really different from the heterogeneity of a clinical spectrum. It's amazing when you look. Could we improve efficacy and decrease the side effects by actually treating those that actually are okay to take their medication right now? Statins is another. Everybody that has a problem right now takes statins without knowing if you actually have alteration on your membrane of mitochondria called the cardiolipin, you're actually going to improve lipid production, but you will decrease muscle. You mean increase muscle degradation. That's why you see a lot of patients that take statins getting thinner, and thinner, and that muscle loss. So that's easy to achieve. You before you start treatment, healthy mitochondria, then you put it back to treatment.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating that there are these practical, sort of pragmatic aspects. This is not ivory tower research with no implications. This has real life implications for everybody, for my colleagues and for for our patients. But I mean, I was fascinated by the notion of mitochondrial transplantation, which I'd never heard of before. But are there other potential therapies which could target mental health, bipolar, dementia, type 2 diabetes, all these things? What else is coming?
Yeah, so a lot of we've been working very hard with a lot of communities and industries to work what we call the metabolic therapies. One of them being nutritional therapies, where you target the mitochondrial health by giving the right nutrition. Another way of that is some people that are, unfortunately, I'm originally from Brazil, and I know very well that some parts of Brazil we don't have enough access to clean water or clean foods, or even potential to buy the vegetables and all that is needed. So, how can we take the essential metabolites, essential parts of the food to give to communities and populations to get a first start, to gear up your mitochondria until you take that family of that person out of the terrible mode. You can think one of them to be for poverty or for low income countries, but you also can think that for mood disorder. You're not going to be able to take a person that is in mania and say, go cook. But you can take that person and give this initial cocktail to boost, to take the person out of mania, to restore, and then start teaching that person how to integrate nutritional health on that. Or for someone that is extremely unwell on the beginning on my own diabetes type 2 is extreme fatigue, cannot do anything, is depressed, which is very common on type 2 diabetes. Get geared up with this cocktail that introduce mitochondria and nutritional therapies. So I think the future of mitochondria will be really appropriate nutritional therapeutics that are guided to improve whatever is missing on your mitochondrial metabolic pathways, and nutritional cocktails that are actually geared to be put together to a different part of where mitochondria is needed. And next level is mitochondrial transplantation, where you simply replace your mitochondria that is not well with a mitochondria that is well.
Wow, that's really innovative and inspiring. I'm sure, is this what you're doing with your Mito 2I initiative?
Yes, indeed it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we can put this in the show notes as well, but I know it's something you're busy with a whole agglomeration of fellow researchers and patients and interested people, but I think it's the Mitochondrial Innovation Initiative, or Mito 2I. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yes, that's right. So Mitochondria is a strategic initiative of University of Toronto, but is actually global and Canada-wide, and is free and open to anyone to become a member. We are heavily in funding students and clinical students, medical graduates, everyone, nursing, healthcare practitioners, nutritionists, diabetes, everyone that works in the field to understand what is the next level. And we are going to be coming soon, hopefully by the end of this year or beginning of next year. We will be launching a collaborative program, which means anyone that is actually under MD studies or under nursing or graduate studies can join for free this collaborative program to learn how to educate them into this. We've been working with several universities to put the mitochondria back in the curriculum. So I put a shout out there. If any one of you want to work with me to put this into the medical curriculum, nursing, pharmacy, any of the healthcare curriculums, I'm here to hear your thoughts and how we can work together to change that.
That is wonderful, because that really is what needs to happen. So just in beginning to wrap up here, the simple actionable steps that our viewers and listeners can take, basically to summarize, avoid those simple sugars, try and avoid the processed food, try and get ketones if you can. And that'll be a good start, I'm sure. But what I want to really ask you, it's maybe a bit personal, but I'd just love to know what motivates you day after day to be doing this work. What is your ultimate goal? What is it that drives you to do this work? It's such wonderful work, but there must be something driving you. You're not an ordinary human.
Oh, come on. No, there are several things that drive me. One is that I have a dream. I always had a dream of fulfill my life, of leaving a footprint in this planet that can change the lives of people. So my research is really deep in the heart. I I have a very hard time. I'm a pharmacist by training, and I know how molecules are formed, and it's very difficult to me to see that this single little molecules will be the saving the cure for the world, and that we need a change in our set of minds. And I'm passionate about creating preventive medicine for people to live health lives. But more in a personal note, my dad lived an incredible life for many, many years. He was a professor at my hometown at the university in the statistics department. He was a very hard person sometimes. He had his lows and downs and ups that were very energetic, and never accepted a lot of help in terms of the doctors to go see what was going on with him. Of course, developed diabetes type 2. They had 5 heart attacks over life until the last one took his life last June. And it was really hard for me to watch, trying to offer help, try to say you need to eat better, but no, I don't want to listen about this. So I really believe that if we change our habits, our attitudes, how we front life, we can change everyone. And I hope this will change the lives of families and have a better family life, because it was hard to see my dad going through what he did.
Right. And that is interesting because so many of us that feel called like you do to change the world, whatever,
Yeah.
you're motivated, but it goes back to something personal, doesn't it? A personal experience or seeing a loved one in trouble, etc. So I think that's a lovely sort of personalized way to end off, Dr. Andreazza.
Thank you.
Just want to thank you so much again for joining us today, giving us your time. Been just delightful speaking with you.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. Awesome being here.
yeah, I would like to thank Anne Mullins, our producer, Graham Wheeler, our technical whiz, who makes it all happen, the Institute for Personalized Therapeutic Nutrition, which sponsors this podcast series, the Rural Coordination Center of British Columbia, which inspires me to do this work. But above all, thank you, Dr. Andreazza, for joining us and inspiring us. It really, I mean, it's been inspiring. My mind is just spinning now, all the possibilities and potential that you have unlocked. So thank you again. You have been watching At the Helm. I'm Dr. Charles Helm, your host. I hope to see you all again soon on At the Helm. Thank you.
Thank you very much.